Okay, we'll call this Estimates Committee meeting to order. This evening, our clerk is Julia Sipple, supported by Chris Guthier. If you could please call the roll.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
Councillor Sless.
Present.
Councillor Utley.
Here.
Councillor McCreary.
Here.
Councillor Vanderstout.
Present.
Councillor Sicoli.
Here.
Councillor Wall.
Present.
And Chair Martin.
I'm here. And Mayor Davis sends his regrets. He has a big city mayor's meeting, and they're one of the things they're discussing is trying to get some more money out of other levels of government for COVID expenses. So we wish him well in that. And just a reminder, the following rules apply to Estimates Committee meetings. All motions must be moved and seconded. Each speaking opportunity for members is 3 minutes. There's no limit to the number of times a member can speak on the same question. Reminder to councillors that you must be in the January 20th eScribe meeting to vote. We will break at approximately 6 o'clock for a dinner break. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest for any of the items on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Joelle, could we have a overview of step 3A and 4A?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair Martin. Just a reminder that the 2022 and 10-year corporate-wide capital budget document can also be found on the city's website. So for anyone that is watching this evening and wanting access to the full capital budget from the agenda, they can take the electronic link that is located at step 3A. It is recommended that members have this document open as the committee proceeds through the budget worksheet this evening and on the next few nights, as many of the steps in this worksheet will make reference to page numbers in the capital document where additional information on specific projects can be found. Moving on to step 4A, we are beginning this evening with the Brantford Public Library 2022 capital budget. So information on the local board budgets, including the Brantford Public Library for 2022, can be found on page 588 of the capital plan. The 2022 library capital budget consists of just one project totaling $176,000. That is proposed to be 50% funded from library reserves and 50% from city reserves. Chair Martin, you can move on to step 4B.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll now ask Raylyn Ambro, CEO and Chief Librarian, and Ken Simons, Manager of Business Services, to present on the Brantford Public Library budget. When presentation is complete, we will proceed to 4C.
Thank you, Chair Martin and members of the committee for the opportunity and to speak in your consideration this evening. As noted, I'm Raylyn Arambro, the CEO and Chief Librarian at the Brantford Public Library, and with me on the call is Ken Simons, our Corporate Services Administrator. And the capital budget submission was provided with approval and direction, of course, from the Library Board. Next slide, please. So as Joelle mentioned, we just have the one project coming up for 2022 under the category of state of good repair. The project is the modernization of the public elevator at the main library. The elevator is important for customers, especially with mobility issues, to be able to access the building fully. Details are on the sheet in your package, but essentially the recommendation to update the equipment was identified during a technical audit around 5 years ago. The control components are outdated and becoming obsolete. So if there was a breakdown, finding replacement parts at this point may not be possible. The Library Board has identified the ability to fund half of the project through library reserves. Next slide, please. So $10,000 was previously approved for the project and covered the design and specifications in 2021. The remaining total for 2022 is $176,000, and as noted, half of that was submitted as third-party contribution from the library reserves, which makes the request is $88,000 from the city for this project in 2022. Next slide, please. For future capital goals and challenges, I'll give you an overview of the future projects that were identified in our capital submission and some insight into the library's capital planning approach. So under growth-related projects, first up is the new library branch in the Southwest Community Center, which is eligible to be funded entirely through development charges. And since I did have the opportunity to provide information specifically on this project in November, I know that you're aware that library studies, collection standards, and municipal comparisons all indicated the need for a new library branch in Brantford. And there were several compelling reasons why the shared facility in the Southwest is the preferred project for the new branch. So thank you for the support that's been provided for the project so far. You may also recall from my recent presentation that the Southwest project alone is not enough to meet the recommended library service standards throughout the city. So the recently conducted library planning study recommended acquiring equipment to facilitate access to collections in underserviced areas while we continue to address the deficit of library locations in the coming years. So that's what the alternate library services delivery equipment item is all about. There are a few options available to provide access to materials in other locations in the city, such as book vending machines, holds, lockers, or bookmobiles. So we plan to review those options and locations in 2022 and aim to purchase in 2023. And in addition to those future growth-related projects, we've identified a few projects related to maintaining good repair for library facilities and equipment, namely main library roof replacement in 2023, lighting upgrades in 2023, and building automation upgrades and consolidation in 2026. And this latter project is another one that has library board approval for funding a portion from library reserves. So library staff and the board took a more thorough and strategic approach to capital planning this past year. And while developing this 10-year capital request for the city, we simultaneously identified upcoming minor capital needs to be funded through library reserves. The board's goal is to ensure that the library is maximizing use of the reserves while also maintaining an appropriate balance for contingencies, keeping in mind that library reserves are not consistently funded through reliable designated transfer envelopes. So the board asked me to relay that what you're not seeing in the library's capital budget request are numerous minor capital project needs that will be handled internally. Next slide, please. In summary, the library board's 10-year capital request from the city include projects that maintain existing library facilities and equipment and projects that expand library services in Brantford in a reasonable and responsible manner. While preparing capital plans, the library is mindful of city plans and priorities, which is why, for example, we introduced the security camera project in 2021, and we have lighting upgrades planned for 2023. And we are aware of the prioritization guidelines recently developed by the city and anticipate their application to future library projects. And the library introduced a more in-depth and coordinated capital planning process this year that considered internally funded minor capital needs while simultaneously developing the capital request for the city to balance optimized reserve fund use with the sustainability of the funds. And that is everything. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. We have several. Councillor Sluss, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Raylene, for your presentation. You're funding half of the library or the elevator project through your reserves. What's the balance left in that reserve after you're done your project?
Through you, Chair Martin. So if you just give me a moment, we have, I do have some reserve fund balance information here. Just give me a moment. So that particular reserve, here we go. So our forecasted balance at the end of 2022, once that project is taken care of, and the other projects that we intend to take care of, is just over $230,000 in that equipment reserve fund.
And how is that reserve replenished?
So our reserves, for the most part, except for one exception, which has to do with post-employment benefits, but for the most part, all of our reserves are funded through surplus. So we don't have a transfer agreement, like a regular envelope that comes over. We're funded by surpluses.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more if I could, Mr. Chair. The 75,000 that you have earmarked for alternate delivery mechanisms, does the 75,000 actually put you into business, or is that to study what alternatives are and what they could be?
That's to actually go ahead and do it. Yeah,
And purchase.
not to study it. Well, we can handle that internally, and we were able to get some good information through the planning study, and as well, we'll just do the legwork and choose on our own. But yeah, that's to actually procure the equipment and go live.
Okay, and just finally, Mr. Chair, if I could, the new branch that you're referring to out in the Southwest, the number we hear is 6 point something million to do that. Does that equip that branch? Is your collection then complete with that $6 million, or is that the physical plant that you build with $6 million?
Through you, Chair Martin. I believe the costing does include like the initial purchase of the collections for the new branch, and then the ongoing collection maintenance would go into operating, but it does include the collections. Yes.
So that's a turnkey then, Raylene.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor Utley, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Raylene. Raylene, thank you for your presentation and for the support you've had from Ken. Can you explain to us, for the people looking in, how critical the elevator is?
Through you, Chair Martin. Thank you, Councillor Utley. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little hard to track. We don't actually track ridership of the elevator, and of course, not all mobility issues or disabilities are visible. But what I can say is that in a typical year, the main library attracts more than 360,000 visitors annually. And that number includes a wide cross section of residents. So obviously including those with disabilities and mobility issues, seniors, and of course, young families that need the elevator as well for their strollers. So the elevator really is an important piece of equipment for ensuring that all services and collections within the building are accessible to all, especially since different services and collections are available on different floors. And we do have 2 entrances on different floors as well. So many people use the back door and the elevator because that's where they can find parking, for example, but that's not necessarily the floor they want to visit. So it's an important part of our service to maintain accessibility for sure.
So if people have mobility issues, or they have young children in baby buggers, that would really much limit them to the main floor.
It would limit them through Chair Martin. It would limit them to the floor that they came in on. So
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, yes, that's right, because there's the rear entrance. And then lastly, to install a new elevator, what are we looking at in terms of time? 3 months, 6 months?
I believe we're ready to tender, sorry, through the chair. I don't actually, I might ask Ken to answer that question on the timeline of the project.
Thank you.
Yes, excellent question. Through the chair, that 3 to 6 months maximum, I would more guesstimate within that three month range. Obviously, biggest challenge, right? Or not obviously, but one of the biggest challenge right now from time of tender and getting it out will be availability of all the parts and components and everything else, and the supply challenges we're facing in the world these days.
Thanks, Ken. That was confirmed my estimate. So thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor McCreary, you're on.
Sure, thank you. Ken, did you obtain any sort of input from the city's facilities folks with respect to your elevator?
Through the chair, Councilor McCreary, in this case, we basically relied on a consulting company that they traditionally use to provide those specifications and review. So they do consistent work, and I'm doing other work throughout the city because it is a very specialized situation. Specifications are drafted and ready to go. So at time of tender, I would anticipate, just as we did with the St. Paul branch HVAC, some involvements from facility to make sure we catch any lessons learned or anything else as we go out to tender.
And your consultant's an independent third party. It's not Otis.
Definitely, yes, sir. It's independent consultant does this work.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Ray Lynn, I wonder if you could tell me what your contribution to reserves ended up being for 21.
Through the chair, you know what? I don't believe I have that information on me. I can certainly look it up and provide it through memo.
Sure, if the clerk could make a note to provide that to us. And what's your expected contributions to reserves for 22?
Through the chair, I think I might invite Ken. I don't know if we have that forecasted at the moment or not.
It's through the chair, Councilor McCreary. Ultimately, we budget, the only budgeted transfer within the operating budget for reserves is transfer for the post-employment benefits, and that sits at 30, just roughly a little over 30,000, 30,500, I believe. But no consistent source to the capital reserve. So it would be based on if or whatever any kind of surplus the board ends up with at the end of the year.
Super, that's excellent. Thank you very much. And Ray Lynn, let me ask also if you could provide us with not just the contributions from 21, but say for the last 5 years, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Will do.
And one other question. Raylene, you said that you had 360,000 visitors to the library last year. That's not people coming through the door, right? That's online as well.
Through the chair, actually, so I said it was a typical year, so it actually was pre-COVID. That was our most recent. That was 2019. That was our 2019 for in-person traffic to the library at Maine. So no, not digital visits, but in person.
So that's like 1,000 people a day. That's a lot of people.
We do see a lot of people.
You should be replacing the front entrance carpet every week. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wall, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you. You'd mentioned in the presentation about accessibility. How does somebody, if the elevator wasn't there, is there a means for somebody to get up and down besides the stairs?
Through the chair, so we do have a service elevator. So on the so far, fortunately, rare occasions where we have had elevator issues with the public elevator, we actually have a sort of complicated, onerous system of staff escorting individuals who need access into the staff-only area of the library and escorting them on the staff service elevator.
Is it a requirement to provide an elevator as per some act or provincial mandate, or?
Through the chair, I do not know. I can look into that.
Of course we should provide an elevator, I guess, is where I'm going with this. And I'm just wondering if, there is any potential sources of additional funding from the province or any sort of programs that provide funding to organizations such as yourself to make sure that they have these things. And if that was investigated or taken advantage of, if it exists.
I don't believe so. Through the chair, that we investigated it. Sorry, I should say, yeah. But possibly we can.
Yeah, I know that there are grants and different fundings out there to provide accessibility so that facilities are, yeah, okay. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, I got one question before we go to second time speakers. In your presentation, you listed several projects that don't seem to show up in our plan. Is that because you're funding them with your own reserves?
Chair, Chair Martin, through yourself. The projects under, if you're referring to the slide about future projects, so those are just, they were submitted in the detail sheets, but because they're not 2022 projects, they're later, they're future projects within the 10-year plan. They were submitted. I can give you the reference numbers in the sheets, if that would be helpful to you.
Well, Joel just popped up. Hopefully she has an answer for us.
Yes, yes, Chair Martin. So at step 4C, we're just going to be dealing with the 2022 capital requests, but then at step 4E, there's an opportunity for council to ask any questions on the remainder of the 10-year plan, which at that point in time, it directs members of the committee to page 589. And on there is the full 10-year. And there's 5 projects on that page that you'll be looking at step 4E. So the reference number 27, 138, 337, 338, and 339.
Okay, Councillor Sluss, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, you partially answered this, I think, Raylene, dealing with Councillor Wall, but the exact, do we know the time it will take that we will have no elevator, like the installation or the building of the elevator? Like, how long will we have to deal with the cumbersome way of getting people from here to there?
Ken, do you want to take this one?
It's through the chair. We would anticipate 2 to 3 months, possibly, if everything goes well. At maximum, hopefully. It's
Okay.
modernization, so it's not all the components are being replaced. So provided everything goes smoothly, there will be at least probably that 2 months potentially that we're directing people through the MAC.
Okay, and during that 2 or 3 months, Raylene, do you need additional staffing to have folks available to escort people up and down and get them to where they want to get to?
Through the chair, I expect we'll be able to manage. We'll just have to be coordinated in our approach. All of our staff all of our public service staff are connected through headsets. So if somebody's escorting them, they'll be able to still communicate with their coworkers on the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing no further questions on this. 4E, do members wish to make any motions to amend the 2023 to 31 capital forecast as presented? Okay, seeing none. Joel, can you provide an overview of step 4F?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair Martin. So at step 4F, we will be moving on to the budget of the John Noble Home. So the committee has been provided with the 2022 John Noble Home capital budget on page 588 of the capital plan. That budget totals $5,591,089 and consists of 9 projects that are funded through a combination of tax supported reserves, which is essentially the John Noble Home capital funding envelope, as well as some debenture financing. So the 2022 projects can be discussed at step 4G, followed by the remainder of the plan at step 4I.
Do any members have any questions on the John Noble Home capital projects? Councillor McCurry.
Chair, thank you. In general, maybe Joel is best able to answer this. With respect to the purchase of items, for instance, chairs and things like that, is there a threshold that we use to consider an item a capital item? For instance, something that costs more than $10 or more than $500 or more than $1,000? What do we capitalize?
Through you, the general rule would be $50,000. It's important to note here that what's presented at 4G is just the city's portion of these projects. So there is a county portion of almost 30% as well on top of these amounts to give the total cost for the John Noble home.
Okay, so particularly with John Noble, and I mean no disrespect, we see a bundling of a number of items to come, to a significant number. And I'm wondering, is that typical for what we're doing elsewhere? I realize they probably do this stuff in bunches annually, but I'm just looking for some rationale for bundling.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not really sure what is meant by bundling.
Well, so we're capitalizing anything over $50,000. Is that what we're saying?
The general rule is $50,000
Okay.
and generally it's large, not annual type expenditures that would come forward through this process.
Okay, and I'm sorry, my question isn't really about John Noble, Mr. Chair, but it seemed like a reasonable place to ask that. I'll come back to it with respect to other types of things that we're purchasing. And if you just bear with me, I do have some additional questions on John Noble. I just have to go through the list here to find them. In a number of circumstances, we're bundling up some trades with other work. For instance, apartment refreshes includes carpeting, appliances, painting, as well as common area refresh, including carpeting and HVAC. When we're doing work like HVAC, Jennifer, is that in association with refurbishing the common area? In other words, are we putting in new plumbing fixtures, new heating and ventilating fixtures?
Through the chair, I will refer that one to Jamie, our project manager.
Okay.
And he should be here.
Through the chair, the HVAC would be in the apartments. So I can refer this to Shelley, but I believe with the small operating budget, some of that hasn't been covered. So when a apartment, for example, we had one that was refurbished, had to have the entire walls, everything done, floors in that apartment. So we wouldn't have had that in the operating budget, and that's where some of this bundling, if you want to call it that, has come. And definitely, that's what that HVAC verbiage was.
Okay, so you'd be doing things like that, Jamie, as part of a bigger parcel of work for a single contractor in some cases. Is that how that would work?
In the last case, it was done, yes, through one
Okay.
contractor. It would depend on the situation, yes.
Okay, thanks very much. That's very helpful. I'm quite supportive.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, do members wish to make any motions to add to the proposed 2022 capital budget as presented? Seeing none, do members wish to make any motions to amend the 2023 to 31 capital forecast as presented? I saw a hand go up and then disappear. Somebody changed their mind, did they?
That was me, Mr. Chair, and I was a little slow getting it up. I just wondered, I didn't see anything in there specific, but with COVID, we're changing the way we filter air. And I just wonder if all of those things have been captured somewhere in the expenses. The filtration systems and the filters that are used within them. I presume we've done all of those things and it's been captured somewhere. Am I safe in assuming all of that?
Through the chair, yes. And I will actually ask Jamie also to explain a bit about that.
Thank you.
Through the chair, so we haven't had to do a lot of increase because of the newer nature of our air handling units. The additional filter costs are being absorbed so far through operational. My personal challenge is honestly getting in the higher grade filters. honestly, the back order on them is 4 to 6 months to even get in a filter change of that higher density, if you want, type of filter.
If I could then, we are complying and doing everything we need to do to keep folks safe. Can I just assume that, and the mechanics of that, I'll leave with you folks. I guess what I'm looking for is for myself, and I think probably for the community, is to know that we can feel secure that we're doing all that we can do to keep those folks safe.
So through the chair, we actually go above our requirements and have in the past on filter changes within the home, just as a matter of good practice. So, for example, if you were doing them semi-annually or quarterly, we actually do monthly filter checks and replace as necessary. And yes, we actually exceed the requirement and hold to the best practice.
That's great reassurance, and I'm really pleased to see that. And probably not the appropriate time, but I just like to say thank you for keeping those folks safe. It's really tough work you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If nobody has anything else for John Noble Home, we'll move on. Thank you very much, folks, for answering the questions. If we could have an overview of step 4J, please.
Yes, through you, Chair Martin. So we'll move now on to the 2022 capital budget and 10-year capital plan for Brantford Police Services. Again, the 2022 capital budget for police services is on page 588. The plan totals $956,935. It consists of 6 projects funded from a combination of development charges, grants, and police and city tax supported reserves. So there'll be an opportunity at 4L to discuss the 6 projects in 2022, and then at 4N to discuss the remaining projects in the 10-year plan. And Councillor Martin, you can move to step 4K.
Thank you. We have Chief Davis and Deputy Chief Saunders here. Chair Littell was planning to attend. Unfortunately, he's not feeling very well, decided not to. So gentlemen, please proceed with your presentation.
Good evening. Just wait for it to, there we are. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having myself and Deputy Saunders here. As you said, Chair Littell extends his regrets. He's feeling under the weather, so he can't make it. You have the packages in front of you, and everyone can see what's on the screen here. So if we can have the next slide, please. So all of the work to date that we presented to the board has referenced the police service headquarters redevelopment. Through discussions with the finance section at the service, in a later slide here, you'll see that that's actually been removed from ours because it is a project of the cities. And so in the later slide, you're going to see this large number of $28,591,571 removed because it is a city project, and it would be best appropriate for Public Works to speak when they're speaking about it. So when you take that out of the mix, it's the 6 projects as was mentioned, and they're just in order here based on the size, dollar value size of each project. The caveat being that at the base of this slide, you'll see the marked vehicle changeover, that 50,000. If we were to do it sequentially based on the dollar value, that would have been the last one, but it goes hand in hand with the police vehicle fleet replacement. So as you see, it's a dollar amount of $377,904. And this is a transition and assessment period. We had a consultant into the police service in 2019 that recommended we transition from leasing to purchasing our vehicles, but there was no research done in that assessment to explain or justify, is that truly the way to go? And so you take that variable, and then it's compounded by the supply chain challenges that we're all experiencing, that the reality is, even if we had the dollars to purchase our cruisers outright, our police vehicles outright, we just simply can't get them. They're so far back ordered because of supply chain issues. So what we've done as a police service is we've made the decision that we will purchase 4 outright, lease 4, and then buy out the leases on 2 of the vehicles to allow us to have the number of vehicles we need operationally. But more importantly, it allows us to then do an assessment of the 4 purchase versus the 4 leasing. And then the buyout of the 2 helps us have the number of vehicles we need to get the officers on the street. And as I said earlier, hand in hand with that is the 50,000. So that 50,000 is the equipment that is not factory. It's the equipment that goes in and on the car. So your roof lights, your computers inside the car, the cages, we call them, that separate the front from the back from the criminals. And so, like I said, that would normally have been the last item, but it goes hand in hand with the vehicle fleet replacement. Next slide, please. Again, going in order of dollar value, what we'd have next is police minor capital. You have a breakdown there in the capital sheets, but there's 11 items, sub-items, I'll call them, in that. And all 11 of those items are part of our day-to-day operation. And 6 of those items are subject to technology demands and advancements. And it's as a result of that they've just come to end of life. The other 4 are traditional hardware and equipment and tools used by the BPS. And then the 11th item in that minor capital list is something that's indicative of this adolescence phase, I call it, that we're in with as a city. It's a secure firing device, and what that is basically it's a contained chamber that the police services use to test firearms we seize, because we have to verify, are they an actual firearm, are they functioning for court purposes. In the past, the number of seizures of firearms was so low that we could have other services do it. Now the number of seizures we're making, it's a strain on them, plus they have their own issues, and so it's a piece of equipment that we have to bring inside the police service just because of where we are as a city and as a police service now. Next slide, please. The remaining items, if we again look at them in dollar value, sequentially, it's the PC lifecycle program, so personal computers, our virtual host replacement, and our data center operating systems. Again, all of these are technology driven. What we've seen with all the pieces of technology is they have an end of life, and a lot of the companies that supply this have caught on that to make the product so that when it's at end of life, it's not like 10 years ago where you could upgrade and spend some money to build your own upgrades. Now, when it's at the end of life, it's truly at the end of life. To really give an everyday example that you can relate to is if you're an iPhone user, you look at when you had an iPhone 5, it was supported to a certain date, and then it was no longer supported, and you had to go to the iPhone, you name it. So that's what we're experiencing generally with all of our technologies. When it comes to the end of life, it's supported for a while, but inevitably, then it's no longer supported. And so, again, the last 3 on that list are all technology driven. Next slide, please. Just for future capital challenges, going into the future, without a doubt, it's going to be that consistent investment in IT infrastructure is going to be the biggest challenge, not just the Brantford Police Service, but any police service, as we look how we're going to deliver policing. And not to put the cart ahead of the horse, but historically, if you look at multi-term conservative governments, should the current government get a second term, every multi-term conservative government typically embarks on a road of either expanding services area or forced amalgamations. And so we have to be alive that could be the future. But even if it's not, we have to understand that the future of policing is no longer bricks, mortar, paper notebooks, and handcuffs. Everything we do has a technology bent to it nowadays. And then the other thing we have to be alive to is the always present reality that federally, provincially, or municipally, there could be mandates that will impact our IT requirements. And just as an example, when we went through the George Floyd, when they had that ripple effect into Canada with the BLM marches, you were seeing some within the city demand that the police go towards body-worn cameras. We've heard that talked about at the provincial level and at the federal level. And should a mandate ever come from any of the levels of government to do that, there is a huge IT infrastructure component of that. And so I've just given a few examples here, standardized data storage on the cloud. Again, there's an IT implication, body worn cameras, virtual response to calls for service that some large services are already piloting. All of these things are great ideas. I do not dispute they would make policing more accountable, but they all come with an IT component that does cost money. So this is just for future, capital challenges to think about, is that we have to be alive to those, and especially as we move towards a new building, that will be a parallel component we have to be alive to in the future. Next slide, please. So we had the building on here. It's been removed. Again, it wouldn't be appropriate for it to be here, but I just mentioned it because all of the discussions to date with the board, when the board had this for approval, we did have the building on there, but the decision has been made to remove it, and that it will sit over with the city and the unit responsible for the building. And I just want to point out, last year our capital was just over $1 million. This year we've come in under $1 million. Next slide, please. And then this is the visual of the graph. It shows all the things we talked about, and I presented them in the sequence of largest to smallest, but here you have based on how they appear in the budget sheets. Next slide, please. I just really want to extend a big thanks to Marva Usher. Marva's been with the police service for 50 years. She does a bang up job for us, and we've experienced and navigated through all the challenges of COVID like everyone else, but also some staffing challenges. And I really want to acknowledge Marva Usher and Deputy Chief Jason Saunders for all the work that they've done on the budget. And then a big thanks to Lucas Cracknell, financial analyst at the City of Brantford. Lucas has been great to work with. And with that, any questions?
Okay, we have Councillor Sless first, followed by Councillor McCurry. Go ahead, Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. Have we looked into, or is any force using electric vehicles?
We have, but I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Saunders. He's actually done a fair bit of work on it.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. We often as police departments rely on larger departments to do some of those tests, as they can be quite expensive. So Peel Regional Police Service, I believe they're just wrapping up a test in which they are examining an electric vehicle to be used as a cruiser. There's no doubt it is the future, it's coming, and we will be planning for that in the future. I can tell you that we have made the decision that we will not purchase, or we're not purchasing any regular gas cruisers at this point. We're only purchasing hybrids.
Okay, thank you. And with the new building coming, is there anything that we should be upgrading now so that when the new building is completed, then we don't have to start replacing things because we didn't, I guess, evolve at the same time we were putting up a building, and now it has certain demands on specifically technology, I would think, where if we're not buying it now, it's going to cost us a lot more later because we didn't build it into a new building. Have we considered that?
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair. So our IT section is heavily involved with the architects that will be designing the facility to ensure that we are including the most up-to-date infrastructure that's available. And again, the note on electric vehicles, we have had the discussion that when the new facility is designed, that it would include wiring at least for when electric vehicles are more mainstream, that that infrastructure is already in place.
Okay, thank you. And just one is more curiosity than anything else, but you've got virtual response call units and virtual host. Can you explain what that is? Like, what's a virtual response?
So what you're seeing some police services do, if there's a positive side to COVID, it forced everybody to rethink how they do business. And so in using the Brantford context as an example, we've pushed the alternative response unit, encouraging citizens to go on and report their crimes online or call in an alternative. But there's still a large group, a large part of society that want that face-to-face interaction in some way. And so like Winnipeg Police Service, as an example, they're leveraging technology now so that it's still being done remotely, You're still reporting it, but rather than the onus being solely on the citizen to go and fill out a form as best they can, or having to call and try and do it over the phone, you're achieving all of the same goals, but you're still having that face-to-face interaction. So that's a virtual response model that's being piloted by some of the bigger services. Like I said, I know Winnipeg's doing it. The virtual host, it's a piece of technology equipment that allows our systems to interact to do such things.
Okay. Appreciate the explanation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McCurry.
Welcome, guys. Good to see you. With respect to the new building, it's not on our agenda for tonight, but are you utilizing the expertise of our information technology staff in terms of input for your architects?
In regards to the facility, so I can tell you that the city obviously are very involved in this project from every aspect.
Excellent, thank you. Now, did I read somewhere that we're getting some new doggies?
Yeah, that's correct. We are going to need to replace one of our canine units in 2022 in regards to a medical issue that the canine unit will have to be retired earlier than planned.
Would you be interested in a 3-year-old Wheaton Terrier?
Perhaps. We'll talk after.
We'll talk later. What becomes of I hope the doggy, I shouldn't even ask this question. Is the doggy going to enjoy a fruitful retirement?
Yeah, that has a happy answer. Yes, the dog will have a very, very wonderful retirement.
Yeah, good. And with respect to the, I'm sorry, I wasn't available for the budget because I wasn't appointed yet to the board, but I'm sure this is a question that I should know the answer to. With respect to the end of lease vehicles and the end of life vehicles, we've got a budget for $50,000. That's to decommission and recommission.
So through the chair, that $50,000 is when a new vehicle comes in, as long as the design of the vehicle doesn't change, the equipment from the old one can be transferred over. It's to cover some of those costs.
And what's the number of vehicles that you've bought? Like, that's not an annual thing. We do that. We're doing it now, and then we do it again in 26. So that's the end of the 4-year lease. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Councillor Carpenter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Martin, and thank you, Chief Davis and Deputy Chief Saunders, for everything that you do and the police service does for our community. Just a question on the virtual host. With that system, are you able to track, how crimes against citizens, for example, or is there an ability for citizens, seniors that are abused or processed, to be worked in there somewhere?
Through the chair, that's actually a different system. The virtual host that's in the capital plane here, it actually runs systems such as our administrative phone lines. It's not part of the tracking of crime.
So, but we do track that, right?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, and we don't have an officer assigned to that, do we?
Sorry, we have a criminal analyst that looks at all the different crimes in our statistics, if that was the question.
No, well, the question really is more towards operating, so I'll save it for the operating budget, but it was just about whether we have a staff person assigned to seniors issues. Thank you.
I don't know if you guys can answer this question or not, but the new build, the renovations, in our plan, it shows that less than half of that is being paid for with development charges. I would have thought that would be more of a growth-related item, and more of that should be paid for by development charges. Is that something you can comment on?
Yeah, through the chair, unfortunately, I can't. I would have to have that conversation with the city and report back.
Well, perhaps when we get to Public Works, we can get an answer from them. Well, unless Joelle had a, no, she disappeared again.
She's back.
Yeah.
Chair Martin, I can comment in that the most recent development charges background study did identify that 42% of the project was growth related. So that does leave the rest as benefit to the current population. So that benefit to existing component cannot be funded through development charges.
I would have thought it would be higher than 42%. Oh, well. Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Do any members wish to make any motions to add to the proposed 2022 capital budget as presented? Seeing none, do members wish to make any motions to amend the 2023 to 31 capital forecast as presented? Okay, with that, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Great. Thanks. Take care, everyone.
And Joelle, if you could give us an overview of step 5A, please.
Yes, thanks through you, Chair Martin. So we are moving on now to step 5A, which will be, or step 5, which will be the consideration of the Brantford Fire 2022 and 10-year capital budget. So at step 5A, the committee has been provided with the proposed 2022 Brantford Fire capital budget on page 583 of the capital plan document. The 2022 plan totals $362,500 and consists of 4 projects funded from a combination of development charges as well as tax supported reserves. So there will be opportunity at step 5C to discuss those 4 projects as well as the remainder of the 10-year plan at step 5E.
Okay, with that, we'll ask Brantford Fire Chief Todd Binkley to commence his presentation with respect to the 2022 fire capital budget. Go ahead whenever you're ready, Chief.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Martin. Todd Binkley, Fire Chief. Through you and to members of council, I am pleased to present the 2022 capital budget on behalf of the Brantford Fire Department. Before I begin, I would like to thank Deputy Chief Pipe, Deputy Chief Armstrong, and all our division chiefs for their assistance in putting together this budget. It is truly a collaborative effort. I would also like to thank financial analyst Lucas Cracknell and the entire finance department for their assistance. I will begin with the 2022 capital highlights, which were developed in conjunction with the master fire plan and our continuous improvement strategies. Next slide, please. Fire station number 1 was built in 2000, and the 22-year-old building will require improvements or replacements to aging building systems this year. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems will need to be upgraded in 2022 as they approach their end of life. Additionally, we will invest in the Fire Communication Center to ensure the modernization of technology and the enhancement of ergonomic workstations for dispatchers. Our 2022 minor capital includes the purchasing of another economically efficient vehicle to replace the older, larger fire prevention vehicles, and we will continue to update our fire and rescue equipment to ensure the department uses modern equipment that improves efficiency and firefighter safety. The department will also continue its bunker gear replacement program in 2022. Next slide, please. Our future capital goals include the upgrade and replacement of the Joint Police and Fire radio system that will reach its end of life in 2020.
We seem to have lost the chief. Okay, he's not coming back right away, so we'll take a 5-minute recess, see if we can get this issue resolved, and we'll start up again at 5:30.
He just mentioned to me, Council Martin, that is just text me very quickly. His computer's crashed. He's got to reboot it. So 5 minutes would probably be in order.
Okay, thank you. Chief Binkley, we decided to take a 5-minute recess while you reset your computer. I see you're back, but just give us another couple minutes and everybody will be back and we'll be ready to go.
Thank you, Chair Martin.
My dog thanks you for the break. I got to feed him.
It's now 5:30. If councilors could turn their cameras back on, we'll regain quorum and resume the meeting. Okay. Okay, Chief, if you want to continue your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Martin. I apologize for my computer crashing. Our future capital goals include the upgrade and replacement of the Joint Police Fire Radio System that will reach its end of life in 2023. Our partnership with Brantford Police Services allows both organizations to leverage interoperable technology for radio and user gear to provide a cost-effective platform that supports both organizations. The pre-engineering and design process for a joint radio system began in 2021. We will continue to work with our partners in police to purchase the necessary hardware and user gear required to update our systems to meet both the needs of police and fire and allow for interoperability with other city departments and community partners. Many of our future capital projects represent the replacement of major capital assets that have reached their legislated or industry standard end of life. The systematic and planned replacement of these assets ensures that the department continues to provide apparatus and rescue equipment, the latest life safety and advanced technology, while continuing to meet the evolving needs and growth of the department and city. One of the long-term recommendations of the master fire plan I wanted to highlight as a future capital goal is that the fire department continue to evaluate strategies to deliver practical training, including investigating opportunities with other stakeholders for a Brantford fire training facility. In the near future, we will consult with other allied emergency services, fire departments, and community partners to develop a comprehensive need analysis and feasibility study. Next slide, please. The Brantford Fire Department's 2022 capital projects as presented total $362,500. Just over $100,000 is related to growth and will allow the fire department to continue to progress and meet the needs of our growing community. The remaining projects totaling just over $257,000 are related to state of good repair and are necessary to replace aging assets or to make improvements on existing infrastructure. Next slide. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Brantford Fire 2022 capital budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have Councilor McCurry first to the question.
Sure, thank you, and welcome, Chief. Good to see you. With respect to your project number 19, it includes a non-emergency vehicle or vehicles and some upgrades to communication and technology. I wonder if you could tell us what vehicle or vehicles you're replacing and what the total cost of that item is.
The vehicle we're replacing is a 2013 Ford Edge, and we will be replacing it with either a hybrid or an electric vehicle. The plan is to move to electric vehicles, is provided we can readily install the infrastructure required for that.
And Chief, what's the purpose of that car?
Purpose of that car is for fire prevention officers to do their routine and complaint inspections.
And do they carry a bunch of stuff around inside?
They do carry a limited amount of equipment.
Is that something you could replace with a two-cylinder little car that would fit in the back of a pickup truck?
I'm not sure whether we could fit a little, electric or hybrid are sort of the type of vehicles we're moving to.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we need to replace an Edge, which is a pretty big SUV with similar vehicle, or if you could make do with something smaller. And I appreciate your commentary about the electric. Sorry, what was the dollar value that you anticipated?
We've earmarked $30,000 for that. Okay,
Just accept my excuse me, my comment then to consider something smaller. I know it's maybe not as sexy to drive around in, but it might get the job done. Thanks, Chief. Good work.
Seeing no other questions, do any members wish to make motions to amend the 2023 to 31 capital forecast as presented? Okay, no changes to the fire capital. Thank you very much, Chief. You did a great presentation. There's only one question. And if Joelle could give us an overview for step 6A, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair Martin. So step 6, we move on to People, Legislative Services and Planning Commission, presentation of 2022 capital budgets and 10-year capital plan. So at 6A, the committee has been provided with the proposed 2022 commission budget, which is summarized on page 591 of the capital plan document. The 2022 capital budget totals $1,219,200. It consists of 9 projects across the Building Department, Clerks Department, Human Resources Department, IT Services Department, and is funded through a combination of rate and tax supported reserves. So the 2022 projects can be considered and questioned at step 6C, with the remainder of the 10-year plan at step 6E.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll have Heidi DeVries, General Manager of People, Legislative Services and Planning, to commence with her presentation with respect to the 2022 capital budget.
Thank you so much, Chair Martin, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to present the 2022 capital budget for People, Legislative Services and Planning. I did not prepare my Oscar thank you speech, so at the risk of leaving anyone out, thank you to everyone who was involved in the preparation of this plan. Next slide, please. So as Ms. Daniels mentioned, our capital highlights for 2022 include 9 projects. And while these projects do not include infrastructure that you can see in a tangible way, these are still important assets to this organization that underpin the work that we do here in People, Legislative Services and Planning. Our key drivers for our capital budget in 2022 include 4 projects in the Human Resources Department, including 1 project, the Learning Management System upgrades that is in a state of good repair, and 2 projects, lean training and the HR master plan update that arise from service review opportunities identified by KPMG. The additional project in HR services is a digital employee file software plan that actually integrates the KPMG recommendation that we move to a digital city format and will alleviate some of the space needs within New City Hall and modernize the way that we manage employee files. The other key drivers are coming out of IT services for a total of $490,000. 2 of those being the state of good repair projects, including Endpoint Technologies. That's the former PC replacement program. If that's approved, we can get Chief Binkley a new computer, as well as a cybersecurity program. We also have IT requesting funds for consulting services to develop a security platform and cybersecurity plan, which is increasingly important in today's day and age. As well as a small project to commence the very exciting animal control facility project that has been on the minds of certain members of this committee as well. That funding for $125,000 would include a project manager to help commence the design and development of the program, which would then drive the building needs in the future. And finally, from building services, we're requesting amounts for a total of $100,000 for 2 new electric vehicles to add to the fleet that's already existing in building services. This was one of our successes during last year's budget and certainly has been enjoyed by the building department as we move towards a modern fleet. Next slide, please. In terms of our future capital challenges and goals, I do want to thank Chief Davis for his introduction to the importance of technology as we move forward. In providing services, it's clear that technology will be a driving force for much of what we do going forward that has been identified not only in the way that we've been able to continue to provide exemplary services here at the City of Brantford, despite working from home through a pandemic and building changes. And so you see a number of initiatives from IT services. Once you rely on technology, we also need to ensure that we have disaster recovery plans in place, including a disaster recovery center, as well as increasing our security initiatives to ensure the security and the safety of those systems. Additionally, of course, the city was successful in having its official plan approved by the ministry, and yet we need to have additional funds set aside in the future for a scoped review of that official plan, as well as to provide support for zoning bylaw updates, which really should happen every 5 years. We also have the exciting work of the development application process review, which was provided to council and approved through performance concepts report in November of 2021. And we look forward to presenting additional reports with our implementation plan to the task force in the next 2 weeks. So we anticipate that there will be future capital challenges, goals, and I'd like to say opportunities as well with the implementation of that program. As well, and tied in with the development application process review implementation, we have online portals for development applications, which will be a future ask of the building department, bylaw dispatch system to modernize the way that we dispatch bylaw officers and further align that with police services potentially in the future, as well as pay equity and compensation review and updates to the HR master plan, which are ongoing. And finally, clerk services has a small item for replacement of the wave machine. That's the forklift that we utilize for our records operations, as well as the future build of the animal control program and facility. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there are a few of these items, 3 in total, that are state of good repair as identified earlier, and the rest arise from service review opportunities or other opportunities or direction that has been previously provided to staff or staff initiatives for a total of $1.2192 million. Next slide, please. So that's our presentation for this evening. We're happy to take any questions. And as I noted, we have the directors from the commission here ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Utley, you have the first question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got 2 or 3 questions. Thank you, Heidi, for your presentation. When I see lean training on any capital item, it's just lights my face up. So I'm happy to see that. So the question I have, Heidi, is is the training first for all the employees and leaders in PLSP?
So through Chair Martin to Councillor Utley, I'll call on Anita Saloki to answer this question because she has those specific numbers. And I should say, just for the viewing public, lean training is not what you do in January after the Christmas break. So perhaps, Anita, you can clarify what we mean when we use that acronym.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much, Heidi. Anita Saloki, Director of Human Resources. Lean training is actually a concept. I'm not sure it actually stands for anything. However, as part of the training, to answer Councillor Utley's, through Chair Martin to Councillor Utley, the lean training will be delivered across the corporation. It'll be consistent throughout all of the different departments. We will be starting with an overview for management, and then we will get into the actual certification process. Up to 100 employees will be invited to get their white belt certification.
Mm-hmm.
Of those 100 people, then 50 would move on to a yellow belt certification. Of those, another 50 to 20 would be moving on to the green belt certification, which requires the completion of a project that would result in savings of $50,000. And then out of those 15 to 20 people, there would be up to 5 people that would be supported in terms of getting their black belt certification, which includes the completion of a project that requires $100,000 worth of savings.
That is a wonderful answer. And one that I'm very familiar with lean. When I saw the price tag $194, I thought, wow, that's a lot of money for HR. And at first I thought it was just your department, but I'm delighted that it's going to be organization wide, because my next question was, will it be consistent across the organization? And you've just answered that question. Wow, that's covered all 3 of my questions. So I'm absolutely delighted to hear that, and very excited. And it will pay off. I can guarantee you that. But it only pays off when you've got good leaders, and that's a goal as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor McCurry, you next.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question relates to item 139. This is paid for by building department surplus, I guess. Could a member of staff indicate what the surplus was for 2021?
Through the chair, if by surplus, is Councillor McCurry, is your question about the transfer to reserves?
Yes, I might also phrase it as departmental profit.
So in terms of the transfer to reserves in 2021, that transfer has not yet occurred, but the estimated transfer is $3.4 million. The current reserve balance is 4.6. We anticipate in 2022, the total reserve balance will be $8 million.
Is there perhaps a window of opportunity to revisit some of our charges?
So through
since you're going to answer, go ahead.
So through the chair, one of the tasks of the chief building official annually is to review whether or not the department is fully supported through the reserve funds that we have. As we know that similar to, for instance, something like real estate development is a little bit feast or famine. So while we have charges to operational to support a full fleet, for instance, and appropriate staff based on what we anticipate will be development applications. And we know in Brantford, we're in receipt of a significant amount of development applications, both this year and looking into the future. That's not going to be the case every year. So we draw on those reserves, and that's why they're mandatory to have as well, to support those years where we have fewer applications. And I can say in terms of you won't see all of those projects here in the capital forecast looking forward, but we're currently undertaking the development process review implementation plan, which I noted at the beginning of my presentation here. And that plan will be partially supported by these reserves. So we do have plans for those amounts to utilize those amounts in accordance with legislation and to ensure Brantford is in the best possible position to respond to the influx of development applications headed our way.
That's exactly the answer I would have given to that question as well. Thank you. Are the fleet of vehicles, are each of them used every day?
So through the chair, Andy McMahon can answer that question better than I can, but there are currently 7 vehicles for 7 inspectors, an expansion of that team to 9. And so we're looking for 2 new vehicles for those 9 inspectors. They are used individually, they are not shared. And we're currently in the process of getting them washed. Andy, did you want to answer that question as to whether or not they are used every day?
Yes, I can answer that, Heidi. Thank you. Good evening, committee. Those vehicles are used every day. We have the correct number of vehicles for the 2021 number of staff that we had. So those vehicles would be out Monday to Friday every day doing inspection. However, with the increase in our numbers for inspection staff, we do need 2 more vehicles to satisfy that.
Andy, you're soon going to need your own parkade. Thanks very much for that. Question now about number 142, Mr. Chair. I do believe I heard that the lean training is going to generate a savings of $50,000 and $100,000. And I wonder if staff could point to the decline in accounts for 2022 that these savings relate to.
So through the chair, the estimated cost savings are based on proposed projects that the individual participants in the certain level of lean certification. So I think it may be black belt and green belt. You're required to complete a project based on a need in the city of Brantford that would generate cost savings of $50,000 and then $100,000 per project. So those projects have not yet been identified, but once those projects come forward, they would have to correspond with either a project that's currently been approved by council or maybe a future project for 2023 where we would see those cost savings.
Now, so is every individual member of staff going to produce those types of suggestions?
So through the chair, the suggestions would come forward by those who have been selected from the group of lean participants to complete that higher level lean belt training. So there are 100 staff who will be identified to take part in the initial training. And then from that, you would sort of lean it down, to use the word lean again, to the next 25 and then 5, and they would be the ones selected to complete those projects. But what we do know of lean training is that the benefits are felt throughout the organization because this training is provided typically to those who are in management positions, but those managers are also responsible for identifying efficiencies through other programs or different ways of working and standard operating procedures that then are spread out to the rest of those who either report to them or other groups within the organization.
You know, you've made Councillor Etley extremely happy. Mr. Chair, I'll keep going if there's no other hands up.
Yeah, you're 2 minutes into your second speaking opportunity now.
Okay, I'll pass on then.
Councillor Sless, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just probably for my own benefit and probably for folks watching, the animal control building, or as most people call it, the pound. Ours is in deplorable condition, the existing one. I don't know how many years now we've been talking about a new one out on Kramer's Way, and it keeps getting kicked down the road. I'm not really sure where it landed. I've gone through and I tried to figure out, and I'm not having a whole lot of luck. So can you explain to us and I guess the viewing public, there's obviously a holdup. There's obviously a plan to get it back on track and to get the thing built and operational. Can you just give a very brief overview of where we are, how we're going to get to where we want to get to? Please, Heidi.
Absolutely. So first of all, for the viewing public, we do not have an animal control facility. There is a facility that's operated by the SPCA, so the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And I think that's the one you are referring to, Councillor Sless. The city gifted land to the SPCA on 10 Kramer's Way to build a new facility for the SPCA. And at the same time, the city reserved for itself a portion of the abutting lands to design and develop the city's own animal control facility. So within PLSP, we refer to this as our Field of Dreams project. So Councillor McCurry, thanks for the background. And essentially what we're hoping here is that if we build it, they will come. And so there are actually two projects. The SPCA was provided with site plan approval. It's registered on title early in 2021. So they're a little bit ahead of us in terms of their project and their plans. In terms of the city's project and plans, we had direction going back to January of 2020 to commence this project. That direction coincided with a change in staff and then with COVID-19 hitting this community and the world. And so this project has been put on hold until now. And what we are presenting to you right now is a request for funding for basically a project manager, a person with skills in this area who understands the program that will be necessary in order to drive the city's own animal control facility. And just to tie in what I said before about the Field of Dreams, it was the hope of the task force at the time, and it certainly is the hope of staff, that in conjunction with stakeholder engagement and conversations with the community, including the County of Brant, as you know, we've had a lot of great success in providing for shared services with the County of Brant and working with that community. But there are communities beyond that who are interested in utilizing a facility that is a little bit more state of the art, that's municipally owned, to provide services for their communities as well. So we are in talks with other communities. There was a plan late last year to provide an update report. There will be one coming forward to committee for their consideration with additional details, because the history on this file is long. But the short story, just to wrap, is that what we're asking for right now is, in addition to the previously approved money for architectural drawings, that we actually have a project management person with expertise in the programming that will drive the facility. There are a number of components to animal control facilities that need to be determined based on the type of program that you're looking to provide before you can move to architectural drawings. So this is, let's get the expertise, build the program that you want, design a facility around that in consultation with the community. I should say as well, there are other organizations that provide animal services through donations or their own type of funding. There are a lot of relief organizations out there, and we're looking to listen to them as well as we design this facility and incorporate some of the work that they're doing.
So after all that, Heidi, at what point would we see a building on that property? Can you give a guesstimated timeline?
So the guesstimated timeline, Councillor Sless, would be 2024. We're looking to, in 2022, design the program, commence the drawings and the studies that would be necessary. And then we're looking at the build starting in 2023, finishing in 2024. Of course, there are always opportunities to accelerate, but again, it depends on how well the planning process goes. I should note, I believe the lands were rezoned through an initial planning application that incorporated the SPCA's lands. So we have some of that underway and out of the way. But this program design will be the focus of 2022 if this is approved.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
Okay, seeing no more first-time speakers, we're back to Councillor McCurry.
Mr. Chair, thank you. One more question about the animal control facility. I seem to recall in the recess of my memory, it's been some time now, but was there some discussion with the County of Brant about being their service provider? And can anybody indicate if that's gone off the rails or progressing?
So through Chair Martin, and I committed to my team that I would incorporate the word doggies in my answer. So our facilities for doggies in the city of Brantford and other animals is hopefully going to be built in a manner that could support operations from the County of Brant and other neighboring communities further afield. Those discussions have not gone off the rails. In fact, Tanya Daniels, our city clerk, had discussions with the head of the county's program very recently. They remain interested, and we remain optimistic that there are opportunities to work together, which again fulfills a recommendation of KPMG that we look for opportunities to provide services when we're building things like this.
That's very good news. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to now touch on the HR master plan update, which is job number 143. If I read correctly, we have not completed the assigned work from the previous HR master plan. Is that correct?
So through the chair, Anita Slokey can answer this more specifically, but I believe there are about 15% of the recommendations that may remain outstanding, but I could be getting those numbers wrong. Anita, if you'd like to answer that more succinctly and accurately.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Anita Slokey, Director of Human Resources, through Chair Martin to Councillor McCreary. Since the capital project description was submitted, there has been an update to the HR committee last fall time, and we're now at 97% completion of the initial HR master plan. The two items that remain outstanding are the leverage of the customer relations management tool, so that when people call in to get an update on the status of recruitments, then we can provide that through the CRM, through the customer contact center. So that is currently on hold. We're taking a look at the privacy and confidentiality requirements for access to that particular system. The other one that remains on hold right now is the step down strategies for employees transitioning to retirement and looking at ways to allow them to transition to retirement more gradually.
Okay, thank you very much. I should say that I do recognize the value to the corporation, but I've got to think of all the items that we've looked at today with respect to capital, this one might be the biggest head scratcher for constituents who are inquiring why we spend so much money on stuff that doesn't translate into building things out of capital accounts. I have a bit of a difficulty with engaging immediately in another round after really basically just finishing the last, but I remain open-minded. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Anita.
Okay, we're coming up on 6 o'clock, but we have not much left to do on the agenda. Do we wish to push through? I'm seeing positive answers all around. So with that, do members wish to make any motions to add to the proposed 2022 capital program as presented? Seeing none, do members wish to make any motions to amend the 2023 to 31 capital forecast as presented? Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to take a run at kicking number 143 down the road a year.
The HR master plan, do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Carpenter. Discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chair, I was hoping I still had the floor. Just as I said in my remarks, I do see value in it, but I also see value in kicking it down the road a year and coming back again in the next year's cycle.
Okay, Councillor Antosky, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're 97% of the way there, and these are a couple of pieces that are important. Anything, if we're planning on keeping anything on the radar, anything that we continue to do is going to get more expensive as the years go on, and I think I'd rather see this just get completed and not have a piece of it sitting out there. So although I understand the reasoning and we're looking for some things to push, I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just let you get a comment from staff. What are the ramifications of this?
So through Chair Martin to committee, this project was actually pushed out from last year. So it was brought forward last year and it was not completed last year. So what we have done is we've created an HR bridge plan that we were relying on until we could get the HR master plan updated. And I know that people don't look the same as bridges and roads, but they are perhaps the greatest asset of this corporation. And so when you invest in an HR master plan, what you do is you give a direct mandate to your human resources department to implement projects that support those resources who are the backbone of this organization, and also help guide the discussions of the HR committee to ensure that the human resources department is delivering on those items. Included in this project would be an implementation plan for a number of key initiatives arising from the service review opportunities, including outsourcing labor negotiations, collective agreements, and working conditions. This is a guiding document for, I would say, one of the most important areas in our commission. And that's why it's being brought here. We did have very robust discussions internally as to whether or not this should come forward as part of the 2023 ask. But the timing since the last plan, which was in 2014, as well as the fact that you will be heading into a new season with a potentially new council this year, we determined that this was necessary to bring forward now to help guide the future 5 years of the Human Resources Department and ensure accountability with respect to their plan to support the people in this organization.
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that explanation. And I think you convinced me that I don't think we should be moving this out a year. So I'll not be supporting what's on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to make a comment? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
I am waiting on Councillors Utley and Carpenter.
I have nothing on my screen. I'll vote in the negative.
Okay. Just as a reminder, you do have to be in the January 20th meeting date to get the votes.
Oh yeah, darn.
Councillor Carpenter?
In the affirmative.
In the affirmative. Thank you. The amendment regarding item 143, HR Master Plan Update, failed on a recorded vote of 3 to 6. Those in favor of the motion, Councillors McCurry, Martin, Carpenter. Those against, Councillor Sokoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, Antosky, and Wall.
With that, are there any other amendments to the 2023 to 31 capital plan? Sorry, capital forecast as presented. Seeing no raised hands, we could get an update on the figures, please.
Through you, Chair Martin, there have been no approved changes to the 2022 capital budget or the 2023 to 2031 capital forecast this evening. So those remain at a 2022 capital budget of $138,593,553 and a 2023 to 2031 capital forecast of $1,114,416,752, and that will be our starting point for Wednesday evening's meeting.
Thank you. And with that, we've completed our work plan for tonight, so we'll recess